It began with a letter, a few pages written in 1939 that would change the fate of humanity. When Albert Einstein signed his name on that paper, warning President Franklin D. Roosevelt that Nazi Germany might build a weapon of unimaginable power, he could not have known what he had just unleashed. 6 years later, the world would stand still, watching, waiting, and holding its breath, as man split the atom and stepped into the realm of gods and monsters. Chapter 1: The Spark of Fear. The story of the atomic bomb did not begin with ambition. It began with fear. In late 1938, inside a small laboratory in Berlin, 2 German scientists, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strussmann, made a discovery that seemed impossible. When they bombarded uranium with neutrons, the atom split, releasing an enormous amount of energy. Their colleague, Lise Meitner, an Austrian physicist who had fled Nazi Germany because she was Jewish, was the first to realize what it meant. She whispered to her nephew in exile in Sweden, "They have split the atom, they have discovered fission." When word of the discovery spread through Europe, physicists everywhere understood the terrifying implication. If fission could be controlled, it could power cities. If it could be weaponized, it could destroy them. In New York, Leo Szilard, a Hungarian physicist who had escaped Hitler's Europe, panicked. He had once dreamed of harnessing nuclear energy for peace. Now he saw something else, a nightmare. He and Einstein drafted a letter to Roosevelt, warning that Germany might be building an extremely powerful bomb of a new type. That letter reached the White House in October 1939. The world was already at war. Chapter 2: The Race Begins. When Roosevelt read the Einstein-Szilard letter, he turned to his military advisors and said, "This requires action." The U.S. government quietly began a series of studies into uranium and fission, a secret effort that would later evolve into the Manhattan Project. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Nazi Germany had begun its own atomic research, led by Werner Heisenberg, one of the brightest physicists of his generation. The Allies feared that the Nazis, with access to Europe's best minds and resources, could reach the bomb first and use it to ensure a 1,000-year Reich. In Britain, a small group of scientists known as the Maud Committee started their own program. They concluded that an atomic bomb was not only possible, it was inevitable. Their findings were passed to the Americans, sparking the largest scientific collaboration in history. By 1942, under the direction of General Leslie Groves, a vast secret project was underway, with one mission: to build the world's first atomic bomb before Germany could. Chapter 3: The Secret Cities. The Manhattan Project grew into a shadow empire, hidden behind barbed wire and code names. In the deserts of New Mexico, in the hills of Tennessee, and in the forests of Washington state, entire towns appeared overnight. At Oak Ridge, Tennessee, thousands of workers, mostly young women, operated massive machines they didn't understand. They thought they were helping the war effort, but none of them knew they were enriching uranium. At Hanford, Washington, engineers built reactors that produced plutonium, an element so rare it barely existed on Earth. The air shimmered with radiation, and workers spoke in hushed tones about the metal that glowed. And in the mountains near Los Alamos, New Mexico, a team of scientists gathered under one man, J. Robert Oppenheimer. Brilliant, intense, and poetic, he had once studied Sanskrit and quoted the Bhagavad Gita. Now, he was leading the greatest scientific gamble in history. Oppenheimer called Los Alamos the world's greatest concentration of scientific talent. Among them were Fermi, Feynman, Teller, and Bohr, geniuses working day and night under crushing secrecy. They knew what they were building. They just didn't know if they could live with it. Chapter 4: Shadows in Europe. While the Americans built their bomb in secret, the war in Europe raged on. The Germans pressed east toward the Soviet Union. The Allies bombed Berlin. But something strange was happening inside Germany's atomic program. Heisenberg and his team lacked key materials, heavy water, uranium, funding. The Nazi leadership never fully understood the bomb's potential. By 1944, the German atomic effort had stalled. Still, no one in the West knew that. The Allies feared Heisenberg might be close, and so they launched Operation Alsos, a mission to hunt down German scientists and seize their research. At the same time, Norwegian commandos destroyed the Vemork heavy water plant, crippling Germany's nuclear hopes. In truth, the race was nearly over, but only one side knew it. Chapter 5: The Trinity Test. By mid-1945, the Manhattan Project had succeeded in producing two kinds of bomb, one made of uranium, the other of plutonium. But no one knew if they would actually work. So Oppenheimer proposed a test, a final, decisive experiment in the desert of New Mexico. They called it Trinity. At 5:29 a.m. on July 16, 1945, the first atomic bomb in history detonated near Alamogordo. A blinding flash turned night into day. The ground trembled. The mountains glowed red. Observers were stunned and terrified. Oppenheimer watched in silence as a fireball rose into the sky. Later, he would recall words from the Bhagavad Gita. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." A scientist whispered, "The war will end soon." Another said, "What have we done?" Chapter 6: The Decision. As the desert dust settled, a new question arose. What now? Germany had already surrendered in May, but Japan refused to yield. Every day the war dragged on meant thousands more Allied and Japanese lives lost. U.S. military leaders predicted an invasion of Japan could cost over 1 million lives. President Harry S. Truman, who had taken office after Roosevelt's death, faced the most terrible decision in human history. On July 25, he wrote in his diary, "We have discovered the most terrible bomb in the history of the world. It may be the fire destruction prophesied in the Euphrates Valley after Noah's time." The next day, the order was given. If Japan did not surrender, the atomic bomb would be used. Chapter 7: Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At 8:15 a.m., August 6, 1945, the bomber Enola Gay flew over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The bomb it carried was nicknamed Little Boy. When it fell, there was silence, and then, in an instant, the city became a sun. A shockwave tore through the air, flattening buildings, vaporizing thousands. Over 70,000 people died instantly. Tens of thousands more succumbed in the days that followed. 3 days later, a second bomb, Fat Man, struck Nagasaki. Another 40,000 perished. The Emperor of Japan finally surrendered. The war was over. The world had entered a new and terrible age. Chapter 8: The Aftermath. News of the bomb's power spread like wildfire. Some celebrated. Others wept. In cities across America, people cheered in the streets, while in Los Alamos, many scientists felt only dread. Oppenheimer met with President Truman soon after and said quietly, "I feel I have blood on my hands." Truman replied coldly, "The blood is on mine." The atomic bomb had ended one war, but it had begun another, the Cold War. Within years, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union would possess thousands of nuclear weapons. The world lived under the shadow of annihilation, a silence where, once again, humanity held its breath. Epilogue: The fire that never went out. In the decades that followed, the scientists of the Manhattan Project wrestled with their conscience. Some, like Leo Szilard, became activists against nuclear weapons. Others, like Teller, helped build the even deadlier hydrogen bomb. As for Oppenheimer, the man who had opened the door to the atomic age, he was stripped of his security clearance during the Red Scare. He spent his final years haunted by his creation, quoting again and again from the Gita, "In battle and in peace, we are condemned to the work of our hands." When he died in 1967, the world was still building bombs. And so the day the world held its breath has never truly ended. It simply changed shape, from the deserts of New Mexico to the arsenals of nations, to the quiet hum of missiles waiting in the dark. For in that one blinding moment at Trinity, humanity learned not just how to destroy, but that it could. And that knowledge can never be undone.